working on this computer. All right. There we go. Cool. All right. So first thing we're going to do is, for those of us who are cooking quinoa, we're going to get that started. Depending on how much quinoa and how many people you're cooking for, I'm doing a cup just because I like to have a lot of different ingredients in my salad. The recipe calls for 1/4 cup if you want to use it more like a topping. And some people really don't like quinoa. They find it a little bitter, and that's totally fine too. So I'm taking my quinoa. Often it's a good idea to rinse your grains. That gets any of the starch that has come off of them while it's being processed, rinsed off, and it tends to create lighter and fluffier. That being said, if anyone's ever tried to rinse quinoa and they don't have a fine mesh strainer, it's one of the most frustrating and kind of pointless tasks because you lose so much of the small quinoa seeds through your strainer. So I'm just keeping it just as is, poured out of the package, and we're gonna add it to our water. We want our water to come to a boil first, and then we'll add our quinoa in. And then bring it down to simmer. I'm letting my water boil. During this stage of the quinoa cooking process, you could also add any sort of herbs, flavoring, garlic, whatever you want into your pot as well. Chili flakes, paprika, any sort of spices is often a really nice way to incorporate some flavor into our grains. Cooking this in chicken broth or veggie broth is also another way to kind of bump up the flavors of your quinoa. So I'm gonna just pop this right here, and I'm gonna keep an eye on my pot. If people's water is ready before mine, go for it. Or if you wanna wait for me, I will set a timer. Sometimes I forget and get distracted. So if you wanna cook alongside with me, I will let you know when 12 minutes is over and we can check our quinoa. But until then, we're waiting for our water to boil. We're gonna get to our next step, which is kitchen safety. So this might be a little silly now, but one of the biggest rules of kitchen safety, whether at home or working in a professional kitchen, is washing your hands. And I feel pretty confident that everyone knows how to safely wash their hands, unfortunately, with this whole COVID world that we're living in. But again, proper hand washing is really important to stop any sort of pathogens that might be on your food or your hands that you don't want to give to anyone while you're cooking. So we're gonna wash our hands, if you haven't already, for 30 seconds. Sing some songs. There's so many now on the internet to tell you what 30 seconds is. Happy birthday twice is one that I use. And just make sure you get all the different surfaces of your hands. You want to get under your nails, your backs, just pretend that you're scrubbing up for surgery. Our second key safety skill is knife safety. I have 2 different knives here, and I want to show you kind of some of the differences we'll see in knives. This is a traditional kind of 8-inch chef knife, and it has a flat blade here. So that's going to tell me it really likes to chop. Where this knife is kind of tapered to a point, if you can see that, and this is going to tell me that it likes to rock. So depending on what you're working with and what the shape of your blade is, those are kind of the moves that it is designed to make. And then usually there will be some rivets, and that will prevent food from sticking. So my water is boiling over here. Can we see that? A little bit, we can see some bubbles. All right, cool. So I'm gonna add my quinoa. Give it a stir. Let that bubble. I like to bring it to a boil and let it sit for about a minute. And I'm just adding a little bit of salt, just for a little flavor. So the difference between a boil and a simmer is a boil, you get really big bubbles, kind of maximum power. And a simmer is usually at least halfway down on your dial, if not almost too low. And that just keeps a really nice low bubbles One thing that this would be important is if you're like making ravioli or some sort of soft pasta, if you boil it at full boil, you often will cause the pasta to split, where if you do a nice simmer, then you can have more intact pasta. So I'm gonna just bring this down until, and you can start to hear the bubbles slowing down as well. And I'm just gonna put a lid on that. And I'm gonna set my timer for 12 minutes. So if you just added your quinoa, I like to do 12 minutes. I feel like quinoa is usually best cooked about 10 to 15, and then you can always let it sit and steam for those remaining minutes.
Mallory?
Yes.
How do you know that if you're closing it,
Mm-hmm.
and how do you know it's not gonna blow up?
So the pot should have at least half room of space to kind of catch that pressure. You can also cook quinoa with the lid off. There isn't as much of a difference. So if that's something you'd rather have an eye on, and then otherwise you'll start to hear it blow up, or you'll start to see your lid rising. But there isn't as much starch on the quinoa as like your traditional pastas would be, in that pasta water is very starchy. So that's kind of making sure you have a big enough pot, and knowing how starchy your food is, and if you're going to get a lot of those bubbles that have a lot of body. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I have this problem more with, I guess, rice, maybe.
Mm-hmm. And rice tends to be a little starchy, and then cooking it in a different pot, or maybe a pot that has a better fitting lid, that might be also an issue if your lid is kind of loose. I definitely notice with this pot, if I'm doing a full boil and not a simmer, it will start to move a lot and I'll get some steam coming out. And then we'll have a way to check and see if it's done in about 10 minutes, but you're gonna look for little air pockets. And that's how you know when whatever grain you're cooking is done. That means the bubbles have come up and there's not enough liquid. So you start to see those kind of hints of bubbles. I'll show you what that looks like in 10 minutes. All right, so we're gonna get to chopping. Our knife skills. I really like to hold my knife, and I'd be curious if anyone's is different, but you start to feel, this is the hilt of your knife. A good knife has the blade going all the way through the handle. This way you don't have any snaps. And then you'll start to see, especially with this knife, it's tapered. So this is where we pinch. If anyone's ever played drums, it's a similar hold, but we're gonna pinch with our thumb and our forefinger and then wrap our other fingers around. So it looks like this. There's many ways to hold a knife, but this is my preferred method because you get the most power. The knife is literally designed for you to hold it, and you'll start to see how it fits your hand. And you get the most power and control over this way. So if you're holding it a different way, and I would recommend holding it kind of normally and try pinching it and see if that feels any different. But you should have a lot more control over the knife when you're pinching it. So for our first thing that we're gonna cut our salad. This doesn't need to be cut, you can tear this up, but I just like to practice knife skills. I have a mix of some red lettuce and some romaine. Any mix of salad is fine, or greens. You could do spinach, we could have kale in there, or just changing it up and just doing a single salad, butter leaf, whatever you have. It's salad. It's not too fussy. And right now I'm cutting this into strips. And I like cutting my salad just because you can get a little better uniform size. When I was growing up, it was my job to tear up any lettuce for salads. And I would always get slack for making them too big or too small. But what you're looking for, or what I'm trying to do right now, is a nice rough chop, and you want everything to be bite-sized. So if you can make everything bite-sized, that means you have all of those ingredients in the bite that you take when you eat your salad. So I like to keep things small so we can keep all our ingredients and flavors incorporated into every bite. I'm just putting my salad bowl there, and I'm gonna chop some more. If you have leftover salad, Wrapping it in a wet paper towel and then putting it in a plastic bag will increase the shelf life, because our refrigerators are naturally designed to take all moisture out, and that can often destroy our salads. So keeping it wet with some air circulation, like leaving the bag partially open, is a great way to kind of prevent that from happening. Is anyone noticing the difference with their knives? I know we're cutting salad, but I just feel like I don't have to wrestle my ingredients as much when I'm folding it this way. Another thing when you get to the end is keeping a claw. And a claw is making sure that all of our fingers are tucked into this claw shape, and our ends of our fingers, our ends of our fingers are tucked in. And that way, if I'm looking at all of my wonderful new friends on Zoom while chopping, I don't cut off a tip of my finger. So keeping that, anything that's gonna happen will just graze your knuckle. So we're trying to keep all of our digits on our hands, because that's where they should belong. If people are stretching this, you can add more lettuce, more hardy greens. I'm always amazed at what a couple of heads will fill up a bowl, and then when you dress them, or especially with kale, if you start to kind of work them down a little bit, that they just disappear. And so again, my fingers are tucked in to a claw, and I'm just chopping these into nice strips that will be easy to eat. How's this working for everyone? Is this two angles nice? Do you prefer one over the other?
Wait, Mallory, for the little onion things, do I just put water in this and that's it?
Yep, that's perfect. I would say a little jar if you can, but I think
Okay.
that should be fine. You just want enough water to where it covers about this much, but they're not fully submerged.
Okay, got it.
And again, if we're going to be casual about it, we can just do a rough tear on our lettuce. It doesn't matter. Whatever's tasty. All right. Okay, our lettuce is cut. We have 5 minutes left on our quinoa. So our next ingredient will be our onions. And again, feel free to use as little or as much onions as your personal preference desires. I really like green onions because they're not as strong of a flavor, and they're really nice to kind of layer into a green salad. Like you get a little herb surprise with basil or parsley or something in a salad, so it's just fun. And again, I'm keeping my fingers tucked. I'm just doing a nice slice on this. I'm trying to keep all of my fingers, my thumb and my pinky are kind of corralling any loose bits of onion. So we're all staying in one place. Again, if we were making more of a Greek salad, we could be doing parsley. If we wanted to do cilantro, that would be delicious chopped up. Sky is the limit. And then I see you can't really see what I'm doing, but I'm just layering on top.
Mallory,
Yes.
what part of the green onion can we eat?
The green onion, you can eat all of it. The green itself tends to be a little more mild in taste, and the white is more strong. And I would say if you're feeling brave, take a little nibble of both and see how the flavor and the texture changes depending on the part. If we're talking leeks, leeks are another cousin in the onion family, and those get to be thicker. They're usually about 1 inch thick, and that you only eat the whites. I like to use my greens for any sort of stock. And we don't have too many scraps, but I like to keep, just in general practice, I like to keep a gallon Ziploc bag in my freezer, and any scraps I have, like onions or garlic or things I cut off, I just throw that into my bag, and when the bag is full, I cover it with water and then let that boil, and then I have a really nice veggie stock made out of all my kitchen scraps. If you have compost, that's another great way to get a little more oomph out of your ingredients. All right, so we've got our salad, our greens ready to go. I'm gonna ask you, if you haven't already, to
Wait, can I ask, if you're gonna do the veggie stock, how long can you keep the scraps for?
I keep them in my freezer, so I'd say I make stock about once a month, and I'd say anywhere up to 6 months would be fine. And again, you don't really have to worry about freezer burn or anything like that, because it's just going into a pot and then you're discarding any of it. So you're just really looking for that flavor. But pretty much all my onions, maybe some potatoes or carrots, any part of that, celery, anything that's tasty. So I'm gonna add about half of my black beans because we're gonna toss this salad, and then I like to reserve some to leave on top. I'm not sure if other people have made salad, but you add all the tasty things in and then you mix it, and then everything's at the bottom, and it's just, you have to dig for it. So I'm doing about half of my black beans and half of my corn. And again, the corn adds a really nice color. Red bell peppers, avocados, all of that would be tasty additions. And I'm going to give this a little tiny mix just to incorporate. And that's looking pretty tasty. And then we have about 40 seconds, so we're going to peek on our quinoa. I set my timer for 12 minutes. That's in between 10 and 15. So Kusei, I'm not sure if you can see it, but can you see that I'm not sure if I'm gonna steam that up, but can you see that there's kind of little bubbles forming? You can see little polka dots.
Yeah.
So that's what you're looking for when the grain is more or less at its done stage. And so what I like with quinoa is I like to check on it before it's fully cooked. I'm gonna turn my heat off and just let the rest of it cook by steam. That's been 12 minutes. And then this stage, we're kind of fluffing it up. So it's letting some of that steam out. And it's gonna just take its shape. Because if you use too much water or make it too steamy, cook it too long, then it kind of turns softer, more into oatmeal. And there's nothing wrong with that either. It's all about personal preference. But for salads, I like my quinoa a little more on the al dente side, because then it's a little fluffier. Mm-hmm.
Another side question.
Yes.
You said you put half of the beans and then half of the corn first?
Yeah, I just add corn and beans equal just so you can start incorporating some of those flavors, but you're not losing all of the small items of your salad to the bottom of your bowl.
And also, what do you do with the liquid inside the can?
Ooh, great question. And that was something I neglected to tell you. For my cans, I personally like to drain and rinse them. This is a personal preference. I like to rinse it, just especially my black beans or my beans that tend to have a little bit thicker liquid, just so you get a cleaner taste and kind of a cleaner look to your beans. However, if I was making soup or something like that, let's see where my camera is, there we go. I would reserve that liquid because that has a lot of starch, similar to what we were talking about the rice and pasta water. That bean liquid has a lot of body to it, so it's really good for thickening soups. For people who are watching their sodium intake, rinsing your beans and canned ingredients is also a good way to remove any extra salt that is added to preserve it. So it's, again, a personal preference. Do you want to wash your quinoa? Do you want to rinse your beans? But I like giving them a little squirt so they're not too mushy or have that kind of thick gravy, bean gravy on them. Any other questions?
No, we don't add our lettuce yet, right?
You can add your lettuce.
Okay.
Feel free. Again, we're going to be incorporating everything, so it doesn't really matter what order things go in because we're going to give everything a stir. at the end. So our last ingredient that we're gonna pull together, our last component of this salad, is our salad dressing. Salad dressing is very cheap to make and often very expensive to buy. Salad dressing is usually like $5 to $8 for a little bottle. And I often find that I'm disappointed with the ingredients that they put in it. Like I want control, or I have an idea of how I want my dressing to taste. And also salad dressings tend to have a lot of sugar in it. So if it's something that you're trying to be mindful of, take a look at your labels. And your labels can be found on anything that is processed as a law of living in the US. So here's my label. I don't know if you can see that. This is really handy because it tells you all the ingredients that are in it. So for our can of beans, you would say, why do we need a label? They just have beans in it. But this actually, the ingredients are black beans, water, and salt. So they have to list everything by weight that is in this. So this is also a really great ingredient. If sugar is like the second ingredient, you know sugar is the most prevalent ingredient in that. So sometimes I laugh about some of the juices, or if you drink apple juice or fruit juice, and it's like, oh, this is raspberry flavored, the like first ingredient would be apples, because that's a little cheaper and you're still getting that sugar. So taking a look at your ingredients will often help you see what's actually in your food. And then it also tells you different nutrition facts, as well as your serving size and fiber and protein. And so this beans are a great way to get some nice protein into your diet, plant-based. All right, so moving on to our super, super, super simple salad dressing. We have Mr. Olive Oil and Mrs. Lemon, or Mrs. Lemon and Mr. Olive Oil. I don't know why I said that, but I did, so there we go. I'm gonna cut my lemon in half this way. I don't know how to describe it. Long way. So you have a nice long thing. This actually makes it much easier to juice. And if you have a lemon that's kind of tough, rolling the lemon first will start to break up some of that juice and zest. If you are looking for more of a citrus flavor, you can always take the peel of your lemon and grate it slightly with your box grater or mandolin, or just even a knife. This is called our zest of our lemon, and that will give a really concentrated lemon taste without some of the liquid, or with the liquid if you're really trying to get all of your lemon out. And so I'm just going to squeeze this into my little jar. If you have a bowl, that works too. If you have a cup, great. Just anything where you can make a quick salad dressing. I like doing it in small jars because if you have any extra, you can leave it for later, or you can make a double batch. This is literally just lemon and olive oil, so it will last for a while and is really good just drizzled on top or in things.
A quick question.
Mhm.
Is there a substitute for lemon that doesn't have citric acid in it?
Ooh. Maybe like a lemongrass or an herb that tastes kind of lemony. There's different types of mint that have a lemon flavor. I don't know if you can get away from citric acid in the citrus family.
Okay. Well, in terms of making like a separate dressing or something like
Mhm.
that?
Oh, a separate dressing? So what we like the lemon or limes for is just gives us that acidity. So again, having any type of vinegar is a great swap out. Red wine vinegar, apple cider vinegar, just anything that gives you that kind of tart puckeriness. And then I have about 1/4 cup of liquid here. And so I'm just gonna match it 1-to-1. I'm just gonna eyeball it. Get about. And this is all up to your own personal taste. So if you like yours to be a little more acidic, or if you want yours to be a little more sticky, that's all good. And then the reason I do it in a jar is I can just shake. I don't have to fork or mix or tiny whisk anything. And then if this ever separates in the fridge, if I have leftovers, I just shake it again and I have ready to go salad dressing. That cost, 40 cents. This is also a great thing to add different things into. If you have cumin or other types of spices, chili flakes, those are all very tasty to get added into your dressing. I really like mincing up some garlic and throwing it in there as well. That adds a nice taste. All right, so we're gonna bring our big boy salad. I'm gonna move this over here. As you can see, like, you can't see any of my toppings right now. So that's kind of why I like to reserve some for our pretty topping final touches. So I'm going to incorporate this. I'm just stirring my salad, trying to get all the ingredients incorporated. I have my dressing. I'm not going to quite add that yet because I'm coming over here to my quinoa. I'm just taking a couple scoops, doesn't really matter. You can prep your quinoa ahead of time or using any types of other grains, wild rice. And I'm just kind of mashing it around. And I don't know if you can see this. Let's see if I'm coordinated enough. It's steaming a lot. But you can start to see that you can see the different beads of the quinoa. There we go. I'll do it over here. Trying to do reverse. But that's kind of what we're looking for, is that it's still fluffy, it sticks together, but it easily separates and doesn't kind of mash into each other. But that's kind of my tip for not overcooking grains, is always set your timer a little on the shorter side, and then you can check it, and oftentimes the residual heat of your pot will just cook the rest of the grains for you. If you are trying to meal prep this, or if you have too much, I recommend in a jar adding all of our ingredients except for our salad, and then putting your lettuce greens on top. And then you have dressing on the side, and you can just bring that jar with you whenever you want, or have that ready to go in your fridge if you're like, I need a snack or lunch immediately. It's a really easy way to prep salad without it getting soggy with the dressing. All right. Any other questions? How's everyone's salad looking? Tasty? Cool. And if you can see, I've already started to separate, so I'm just going to give this one more shake, and then I'm going to drizzle. But again, remembering the building blocks for flavor is sweetness, salt, acidity, and what was my last one? And fat. So we have a couple different ingredients that are all working together towards that goal. We have the sweetness from our corn is giving a nice counterbalance to our salt and our vinegar, and our acidity of our lemons. Then we have our fat of our olive oil. So it's giving it kind of a silkier body and smoothing out some of those sharper flavors. As well as our beans will do that. They have some nice fats in there. Fats have been given a bad rap as being unhealthy, particularly in the 90s. Everything was low fat, fat-free. And I've seen kind of nutrition trends coming back around. And there are healthy fats, which come from kind of more naturally derived ingredients such as beans, and there are unhealthy fats which come from processed ingredients such as, I can't believe it's not butter, something like that, which is a little more man-made, and those don't play as nicely in your body or in your arteries. So you want to be mindful of your saturated fats and look for unsaturated fats. But the fat actually keeps you full longer, so you're not getting these crashes. Not sure if anyone else has snacked on something and then are immediately hungry in 30 minutes, or maybe you get a spike in energy if you're eating a lot of candy and then you feel really tired. That's kind of those ups and downs that we get with sugars and different types of fats. But this fat of our beans and of our quinoa will really fill you up, as well as your protein. So that's why they often say protein's important if you're working out. It gives you that nice, consistent energy level. And a fun thing about quinoa is that it is a complete protein. So while our beans don't have all of the amino acids and would need to be paired with a starch, either corn or rice, to really get that full nutritional profile, quinoa has all of the amino acids and can be broken down easily by your body. So that's a fun fact about quinoa. I wanted to call attention to the fact that I call this a Southwest salad. And that is because most of these ingredients are indigenous to the Americas. So that's pretty cool. Corn, beans, our quinoa all come from North and South America. And so that's kind of wild when you start to think about other cultures that have already brought that and how quickly they travel around the globe when they were just discovered. If anyone has tomatoes or salsa, tomatoes also another thing that's indigenous to the Americas, and that would be a super tasty add-on. I personally don't have any tomatoes right now because it's not really tomato season, but give it a couple months and we will have beautiful tomatoes available in the area to add into our salad. Diced tomatoes is also a really good option, or just adding salsa on top of this. So this, we now have our nice base of a big, nice, healthy salad. Plenty to nosh on. And now I'm going to come in with the rest of my ingredients just to top it off and make it look nice and full and pretty. Because again, how we eat with all of our senses. Maybe not hearing as much, but if somebody's cooking a meal and you walk in, you immediately know because you smell it, and then maybe you see it and you're like, ooh, that looks really tasty, and then you eat it. So making sure things look pretty is a surefire way to kind of get your brain lit up and excited to eat. And sometimes you can even start salivating just by smelling or looking at something, and that's just your body's natural reaction, being like, I am ready. Consume that. And then lastly, if anyone has their other tasty toppings, cheese, avocado, tortilla chips, that would be a good time to put on. Different types of nuts, cranberries, just right on top.